This is the Great State Mural, Mongolia Portrayed, our bi-weekly podcast that analyzes the current developments, deeper structures, and the joys of contemporary Mongolia. My name is Anand Tumurtala. I'm a journalist based in Ulaanbaatar.
And I'm Dolgion. I'm a development and research professional, currently based in Phnom Penh.
So, in our past episodes, we have examined Mongolia's democracy from different angles. Democratic indices, corruption, rushed lawmaking, civic protests, institutional tensions, and change in government. Multiple times, I would say. From this one can say that there are different, varied, and a series of pressure points that are testing Mongolia's governance and democracy. But there is one common thread that has been pressuring the trust in democracy in recent years, and that is disinformation. Disinformation is becoming a major issue in the country, especially due to the prolific use of social media in the country. And in this episode, we have a special guest who will going to talk about all of those and what they have done to research disinformation in the country. But before that, here is the three universals for this episode. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me 3 or more times, then I'm not fooled, you're the fool. The World Health Organization is a Western propaganda. It is the vaccines that is how they control you. You are the fool. Okay, so today we take the conversation further by looking at the relationship between disinformation, civic spaces, foreign influence, and democratic trust in Mongolia. To help us understand these issues, we are joined by Batsugar Tsedendamba, a Mongolian researcher, a civic activist, and a democracy advocate. He is the current board member and the former executive director of the Independent Research Institute of Mongolia, and one of the leading independent research institutions in the country. Batsugar, thank you for being with us.
As you introduced me already, my name is Batsugar, and I'm a social researcher for 15 years and working on the topics like democracy. And also, honestly, I'm an activist defending civic space, civic rights. And I'm here today to discuss some takeaways and findings from our recent report on disinformation in Mongolia.
Thanks, Batsugar. I'm very glad that you actually identified yourself as an activist. Because as we were discussing with Julian, who's not unfortunately here today with us due to some commitments, we were saying social researchers tend to not be so vocal when it comes to actual advocacy and progressive movements, and they're too quiet. But I'm glad, that's why we also invited you today to hear both your research work and your most recent findings on generally disinformation and governance, but also your experience as someone who's actively involved in fighting increasing authoritarian practices in Mongolia, and also link it with research. So maybe to start off, you just mentioned the disinformation study that you are going to launch tomorrow. Can you tell us what's the study about? Why did you decide to have this? And what does this study kind of look at? And perhaps are there any interesting facts or findings that we didn't expect? Perhaps it's interesting for the listeners. Are there anything that surprised you from the study so far?
So just to briefly tell about what the study is about, right? So it's almost a year-long initiative to look into how disinformation works in Mongolia and what are the negative impacts and effects of disinformation on Mongolian society, and especially for democratic processes and institutions in Mongolia. There are several studies within this initiative, right? So the first phase is to map out the landscape of disinformation in Mongolia, which has been done and published in December last year. So you can access the report on English and Mongolian from our website. And the second phase of studies is looking into how individuals interact with information, especially with disinformation, whether they are vulnerable to it. If yes, what makes them vulnerable to disinformation, right? Identifying those mechanisms of vulnerabilities will help us to address disinformation and honestly to promote resilience of individuals or social groups to disinformation, which is, I would say, presenting a huge challenge for Mongolian politics, civic participation, and public trust, essentially. Our study looks into the first phase of study looks into ecosystem of disinformation in Mongolia. So what enables disinformation, what drives disinformation, and who are the actors and who are the audience and how they are being affected by it. So this is kind of a big picture on how this disinformation process is unfolding in Mongolia.
Is this fair to say there's almost like a disinformation sector?
Yeah,
like an economic sector.
Yeah, that's actually one of the conclusions from our initial mapping study. So we found that there is an indication of disinformation economy or disinformation value chain forming in Mongolia. So the reason why we started this research study on disinformation was that previous polls shown that almost 85% of individuals of public are worried about disinformation. They say that there are harmful narratives and disinformation posing significant challenge to the society. So the concern among public is high. And another poll showed that 91% of people encountered misleading narratives and fake information through Facebook. So this both shows that spread of disinformation is quite high, and people are worried about the impact of disinformation on society and on many different levels, on individual, on community, and whole as a society level. So disinformation is growing and its impact is troublesome and concerning for everyone in the society. So we wanted to understand how this disinformation is working. And to be honest, disinformation is not an act of individual or behavioral issue of individuals or social groups, but it's a product of ecosystem or system, structured system that is being evolved in Mongolia, if you will.
Can you expand on that? Like, I think the biggest question is, as you said, that there's an ecosystem. What are these ecosystems? Who are these ecosystems? Are they domestic? Are they foreign? Are they both? Or but you also said that it is not something of people of do it on their unwillingly. You said there is other people driving. Yeah, can you tell us about who are these people that are spreading disinformation?
So basically our study applied an approach or framework called ABC, right? Actors, behaviors, and contents. So using this framework, we try to understand who are the actors, what are the methods and techniques they are using, and what are the contents. There are many different types of disinformation or fake news, but those fake narratives which are most persistent and continuous are almost always organized. So who are the actors in this organized value chain of disinformation? So first are the instigators or funders, those who are ordering disinformation or false narratives to be spread. Those are mostly political actors, political parties, politicians, and sometimes foreign governments.
Wow, so that's in Mongolia, right?
That's in Mongolia, yeah.
So Mongolian political actors, certain actors, are actually funding and initiating the whole value chain of this disinformation.
So basically...
one type, of course.
Yeah, so the most common type is political actors. Because this persistent disinformation operation needs funding and it serves certain interests, right? So those interests are mostly linked to political interests because from our analysis, we can see that number of false news or false narratives increased during key political events like elections, when there is budget hearings or any other significant political event in the time frame. So yeah, political actors are the key funders, if you will, and instigators of false disinformation. But they are not doing it themselves, right? Of course, there are politicians who make false statements or something like that. But more organized at more organized level, there are PR agencies and individuals who provide services to design these political disinformation campaigns or disinformation operations. So they are the brains of disinformation. And then there are producers of disinformation who produce these contents using misleading facts, cheap fakes, and other techniques. And then there are another actors who distributors, if you will, who distribute these false narratives and disinformation contents to different sources. That could be sometimes digital media, social media, or any other platforms. So mostly this disinformation content are spread through Facebook. So experts who are working, organizations who are working to fight against disinformation say that almost 90% of disinformation contents are shared through Facebook or social media platforms. But in very limited case or in there are sometimes media organizations are involved in disinformation intentionally or unintentionally because of the capacity of editorial board and things like that. Sometimes media organizations tend to distribute disinformation unintentionally. But in some cases, people also criticize that there are so-called pocket news agencies who intentionally distribute false information and false narratives. And another important observation from our study was that the money going into this disinformation economy, if you will, are at least portion of it coming from state budget or taxpayers' monies. And it's really hard to investigate that because transparency is not the strongest fit of our government. But it's
what a shocker.
yeah, but it's an important thing to pursue in the future to really see how money is passing from hand to hand to fund this disinformation and where it is coming from.
Mm-hmm. And just in recent examples of the Tall River highway project that we were discussing on our podcast recently, as there were civic movements and resistance against it, we saw really highly increased social media, not propaganda or fake news per se, but very organized spread of information, which many of the protesters accused the government for spending public taxpayers' money on spreading their version of the truth, basically. So it's interesting to see that these kind of claims are also documented and found through more like scientific methods and rigorous analysis. So it's something quite useful for Mongolian, perhaps civil society activists to demand for more accountability from the government.
Can you maybe give us like an example of like what common disinformation these actors do? Like what are the like the common threads that they use for disinformation? Like I remember like people would post similar takes of some people. They would accuse somebody of something, and as though the post, the social media post, would be about how this person is dishonest and all of these things. And as though if you read it, it seems as though that person wrote it, but it's just proliferated by other disinformation actors. So can you give us maybe like a very common example of a disinformation campaign in Mongolia?
Sure, of course. But just before going into that, I just forgot to mention one important actor in this information value chain, who are the troll networks or troll farms. We often call them fake accounts, but it's organized network of fake accounts to set the mood of disinformation narratives, to distribute them, and to essentially leverage social media platform algorithms to make the disinformation reach more and more people and set the mood for the audience, essentially. And there is a case, court-ruled case, that a group of troll farm operators were sentenced because of that. So that indicates that there is an active network of fake accounts or troll farms operating in Mongolia, offering services. And one of the high government officials who were participated in our interview said that they even propose their services to politicians and other individuals quite openly. So that alone says that this is a quite booming economy right now, right? And to your question, Anand, what are the most common examples of disinformation content? So basically, there are three main themes or topics of disinformation quite active in Mongolia, according to fact-checking organizations. So we also analyzed the fake contents, which has been fact-checked by these two fact-checking centers. It was more than 2,000 contents. So basically, there are, number one is vaccine-related. Or health-related disinformation. For example, vaccine will make you sick, or vaccine will make you full, just like you mentioned. World Health Organization is like this and that, and vaccines, Bill Gates is controlling you through vaccines and things like that. And it's quite harmful because there are a lot of health implications. People who believe those information are suffering themselves in terms of health. And second is financial scamming or scamming contents. A lot of scamming contents related to financial aspects, and also environmental disinformations, right? Especially like related to uranium explorations in Mongolia. There are a lot of disinformation and unchecked information, essentially. And there is political disinformation. Political disinformations are mostly designed in a way to discredit certain individuals. The funny thing about disinformation in Mongolia is that politicians are themselves the key instigators and funders, and at the same time, the main target of disinformation. So essentially, they are paying to create this environment which to which they are becoming the sufferers, right? And it's it's an irony. So
Ram for battle. Yeah.
Yeah. So the most disinformations are designed to discredit the politicians, as you said, making them stating that certain politicians said certain sentences or certain words, or there was even a case when there was a information leak from one of private hospitals in Mongolia. There was an disinformation targeting parliament members who were critical about budget law, and it was there was a fake content saying that those parliament members have STD, essentially to discredit them in front of public eye.
Syphilis and things like that.
Yeah.
Did you do any? Did you observe any gender differences? For example, I remember when we were at IREM, we did a study on analyzing media, not just social media. It wasn't that prolific at the time. Looking at the victims of these kind of fake news and attacks, did you see any difference by maybe female politicians being the most targeted by these troll accounts, etc., or it was kind of similar?
We haven't done this kind of analysis specifically on in the scope of this study, but it's a widely discussed fact that female politicians have more broader or wider disinformation contents, being targeted by a variety of disinformation contents, which kind of targeting their family life, their personal life, their many other things, while male politicians mainly have more targeted them personally rather than more broader circle of individuals. So essentially, a lot of stakeholders agree that female politicians are more vulnerable to disinformation and smear campaigns, essentially. And another important thing just to mention here is that disinformation is like a quite known concept, right? But proving certain narratives fake is really hard in Mongolia. That's which makes the fight against disinformation difficult. For example, these two fact-checking centers show that there are a lot of disinformation on health, finance, and environmental issues, and less on politics. But we can see a lot of false narratives or misleading narratives that being distributed quite continuously and persistently, right? So we can't, individual fact checkers, independent fact checkers can't really check the validity of these narratives. That makes these narratives are quite, challenging or quite problematic. So essentially, that political communication is an important field of political study or political science, right? And it's safe to say that right now, politics in Mongolia is not about competing through policies, but it's about contesting by narratives. And that makes disinformation a booming business in Mongolia.
Mm.
You were talking about how in the health sector that it's becoming more common to see disinformation about vaccines. And when I did some reporting back during the COVID lockdowns, I remember speaking to a few nurses who administer vaccines. They talked about how after the the COVID pandemic, like 2 years after, and they were talking about how a lot of the people stopped. Of the number of people who were taking flu vaccines have dropped because there's just they said that there was just too many people saying that the vaccines just kill them or hurt them or make them ill or give them autism. How much also recently due to the America voting in Trump, and then there's also their health minister being a very much a science skeptic, which they called "Make America Healthy Again," and they talked about how vaccines cause autism. And I seen some posts of how in Mongolia there were people saying, "Oh, look, American health department is saying that vaccines cause autism. These medicines cause autism." How much of that information has been proliferated in Mongolia, and is there any other countries aside from the American side, like other countries, misinformation about our health sector or any other sector that have been affected by disinformation?
So I would say the most from our analysis that we did on fact-checked disinformation contents, health was the most affected sector. The disinformation, health sector disinformation are mostly revolved around fake information around vaccines. And it's not only during the COVID or recently, it happens time to time quite constantly.
Yeah.
But also
HPV vaccines.
And also there were another analysis that done on social media actors who provide certain different disinformation, and it's done by another organization. And that analysis showed that those who are spreading disinformation on vaccine, they also spread disinformation on uranium. And they also spread disinformation about geopolitical topics. So basically, this interesting connection tells us one of two different stories. Whether there's a really active group who are concerned about vaccines and uranium and everything, who is completely misinformed on most of the things, or it's the same network serving different clients, and it's one of the other. And it's really hard to conclude which one is, but that's an open question to everyone.
Since we're talking about the ecosystem, we talked about the disinformation space and the ecosystem. And what did your study find anything on the countering disinformation side? You mentioned briefly that yes, there are some individuals who are passionate about this topic and they're doing this individually, almost like as a outside their full-time work. There are only 2-3 organizations that work on this, and especially given the current development sector and really declining international aid on good governance and things like that, and the government itself being a source of disinformation. How can we counter this? Who can counter this, and who will fund this countering side, the good side, let's say? What should the ecosystem there should look like, and what does it look like now?
So in the ecosystem, there are counteractors to disinformation, right? And actually, government is one of those counteractors, but not being really efficient. The government's flagship policy against disinformation was criminalization of disinformation, the infamous Article 13.14 of Criminal Code, which has been which the Constitutional Court ruled as being in violation to the constitutional rights. there are other clauses criminalizing disinformation. For example, it's a crime to spread disinformation during elections, for example. But however, this criminalization of disinformation has its issues. Some human rights organizations say that this clause helped to protect dignity and integrity of individuals who suffered from disinformation about them. So there are a lot of cases that individual people spread disinformation about someone else out of hatred, out of jealousy, or in many different ways. It's not politically relevant or something like that. And there were a lot of cases that has been resolved using this article. But there are also cases where this criminal code article has been used to silence journalists or against individuals, dissent. For example, before this criminal code article 1314, there was a clause in article in infringement law penalizing disinformation, right? And a lot of individuals who criticized politicians or political government policies were penalized by that law. But now that's not in the infringement law. So what I'm trying to say is that the main policy mechanisms or counter mechanisms to disinformation that government is putting out there is targeting ordinary citizens. So there is this value chain, right, if you will. So these policy mechanisms are targeting those who are at the bottom of this chain, not at the top of this value chain. So
not
there
the
is
big
no
sharks, the small fish.
Yeah. So there is no criminal code articles or any other policies going after clients, funders, producers of disinformation contents. And there are many other government mechanisms, for example, removing fake accounts from Facebooks, right? Or removing contents that infringing different laws. And however, implementation of those mechanisms are not transparent. They are not well documented. There is no evaluation of how effective those are. And because the rule of law is so fragile and so weak in Mongolia, and accountability is not strong, critics argue that even those, like there is a green gate or green corridor, green channel between Mongolian government and Facebook to remove disinformation contents, fake accounts, right? But critics say that sometimes these mechanisms like green channel with Facebook are being used to silence political opponents, to report them as being a fake account or something like that. So implementation of this kind of mechanisms are not transparent, they are not well reported, and there is no sufficient information to really analyze and improve them. And I would say most important and dedicated actor to counter disinformation are civil society organizations and media organizations. There are a lot of consistent initiatives to improve integrity and accountability of media sector, to develop responsible media. And there are also a lot of initiatives to promote media and information literacy among public, to make individuals more resilient to disinformation. So unfortunately, they are not very sustainable because they are being funded by international development partner organizations like UNESCO, UNDP, or EU, and many others. And now we know that international humanitarian and human rights support resources are in decline. So these kind of works are being more and more scarce.
and especially civil society organizations themselves are the target and victim of disinformation. In 2018, for example, we did a conference on democracy. I think, Anand, you were reporting about that as well at the time. And everybody on social media and on the internet, and now I realize it's the troll arm, said, Irene, you are a foreign agent. You receive money from the US, and then you're here to start our government. So the civil society and the independent journalists themselves are labeled as foreign agents. And there were even efforts to crack down for foreign agents and to close the accounts or even the license, revoke the license of civil society organizations through various reform kind of agendas for civic space. So when
have one fund where you can where the government takes in the money and then they can vet the money and then they will give it to the civil society organizations. That was their plan.
And basically stop that.
So if you talk about foreign agents, right? I think the biggest foreign agent is the government themselves, because they are the biggest receivers of foreign funds, right? So if receiving foreign fund equals foreign agent, then the government itself is the biggest foreign agent.
If we follow that logic.
Yeah.
Well, they would argue that they're using that money to help their people, while these foreign agents are helping the foreign agencies, the foreign countries, not Mongolia. That would be their argument.
But that argument is not solid, because they are using this loaned money to invest in sham infrastructure projects, right? And that's debatable.
Yes, yeah. You were saying that that the few ways to improve to fight against disinformation is through like civil societies and through into medias. Would one of them be to also punish Facebook in some regard, or to have some limitations on Facebook, or just to have something to do with Facebook? Because I feel in my heart of hearts that a lot of the times disinformation spreads so widely on Facebook, and Facebook is such a big a tool and a space for Mongolians that I feel Facebook has so much accountability for Mongolians, but they don't seem to care. And I feel like the Mongolian government or the Mongolian people are not really looking at Facebook in that regard. Do you agree in that sense that Facebook needs to have some accountability in spreading the disinformation?
I'm not completely agree with that, right? Because regardless of if there's a Facebook or not, disinformation will be there, because there is an interest, there is a need for disinformation within these actors. We also see disinformation or propaganda narratives being aired to multiple televisions at the same time. So why Facebook is the biggest platform? Because it's cheap, and because almost everyone in Mongolia is on it. So it's not about closing or censoring Facebook. It's about how to make effective partnership with Facebook to fight against disinformation. And in fighting against disinformation, there's one thing we really need to have in mind, which is disinformation itself is really organized and well-funded, but countering disinformation is fragmented as not funded or underfunded, if you will. So there is so little resource to fight disinformation, but there are so many so much disinformation on that, because with the development of digital technologies, producing a false narrative is cheaper and faster by day, but countering them is really hard. So strategy is not about fighting the content itself. Strategy is to fight how to make society more resilient to disinformation, and how to make disinformation more and more expensive, so it doesn't make sense or it's not profitable for those who are funding and spreading disinformation.
Yeah, like Facebook basically profits a lot from basically this information with some kind of, let's say, a channel where Facebook funds our media literacy programs in Mongolia, where they give some of that money back to us because they have basically taken so much from us, from our attention, and used that resources and gotten richer. And why not they give that money, some of it back, for us to teach Mongolians to learn about media literacy and know about things about like deepfakes or like AI images, or to how to spot like fake information, or at least to or at least not to click on false links where they get scammed and lose their money. Would that be an option?
Yeah, of course, in the bigger picture, this platform accountability is an important issue, and the platforms should be accountable for what contents are being distributed on their platforms. And in that sense, not only Facebook, all the other big platforms should be accountable, should be responsible to promoting media literacy, not only in Mongolia, but worldwide, globally. And yeah, so if they spend some of the profits to promote media literacy in Mongolia, that would be great. But how we can do that negotiation, right? And how we can come to that result. But another important thing we need to consider is how we should pay less to Facebook. Big part of the money that is going to Facebook is from political actors
Yes.
who are sponsoring their posts. And
Yes.
to be honest, some of them
I saw,
are coming from our pockets.
Yeah. I remember there was a fact-checking post where they showed, I forgot which politician, but it showed like they paid like almost like $8,000 to promote their campaign, which is nuts. It's more than a regular Mongolian's yearly salary almost, so which is crazy in that regard.
Sure. So there were previous limited number of previous studies going into what makes us vulnerable to disinformation, right? Susceptible to fake news. And they argue that digital literacy and media literacy is important, and young people and older people are the most vulnerable. Also, education is relevant. Location is relevant, and things like that. And based on that previous research findings, we targeted our current research to young people from 16 to 25. And disinformation vulnerability was showed middle, right? Everything in Mongolia is in the middle. There's nothing too bad, nothing too good, right? So basically, in the 5-point scale, it was 2.5, the composite index of disinformation vulnerability. But the key driver of this disinformation vulnerability, why it was on the positive side of the matrix, was that young people are more and more distrustful of any content, whether it's false or true, first.
Wow.
Secondly, they are inconclusive about whether to trust or distrust any content. So this is one of the biggest challenges of that being posed by disinformation. It's one of the biggest impacts. People are less and less being trustful about everything. But trust and cooperation is a foundation of democracy and foundation of prosperous society. And disinformation is hurting our society at the core, essentially. But this vulnerability to disinformation works differently for everyone. So obviously, we see a good connection with education. While the education is not directly relevant to disinformation, but it's being the foundation of how different mechanisms of disinformation vulnerability is operating. So essentially, we see that cognitive abilities like inattention, instant trust, and things like that, or being more trustful of contents that is appearing constantly, or motivated reasoning. People who have predefined beliefs, they are more susceptible to disinformation, or emotional arousal. Disinformation contents instigating fear or anger. People are more susceptible to this kind of disinformation. So, but these disinformation mechanisms are defined or correlated with education level. So more and more educated people can control these mechanisms, and which makes them less vulnerable to disinformation. And another important finding was that community information behaviors are also important for disinformation. So improving the community capacities and resilience to disinformation helps a lot. So for Mongolian youth, more than 80% of them receiving information from social media, which is the biggest platform market for disinformation. And at the same time, only 34% of them are actively seeking information. So Mongolian youth are largely passive receivers of information, and the main mediums of this information for them are parents and peers. Probably, yeah, they are one of the biggest distributors. They could provide information directly to the young people or through their peers, parents, and things like that. So yeah, their impact factor is quite strong. And actually, in our study, we distinguished influencers at two different levels. There are influencers who are have a wider follower base. They tend to be more careful what kind of information they distribute because they are more concerned about their follower base. But there are micro-influencers who have less number of followers. They are much more open and active distributing fake narratives.
Wow.
So, influencers is one of the important mediums, right? So this kind of behavioral aspects make young people vulnerable to disinformation. So our disinformation vulnerability index is quite on the positive side of the matrix, but that's a deception, right? Because they are being more resilient because they are not trusting everything. They're distrustful of everything, and that's not what we want as a society. So we need to promote media and information literacy, but also we need to make the community information spaces, truthful information more accessible to these information spaces, right? That being said, effective government and transparent communication information transparency, media accountability, and a lot of different structural issues need to be resolved to achieve this. And also platform accountability, as Anand has mentioned and argued for. And it's a challenging thing because to achieve, because it's so complex. The drivers and enablers of disinformation are so complex. It's not only about actors and funders, but it's about the fundamental and structural weaknesses of our society making disinformation possible, essentially.
So yeah, we could keep talking about disinformation for a while, but unfortunately our time is coming to an end, and we will definitely bring you on Batsugar in future episodes, and hope to keep this discussion going. And for now, we thank you, and we fare well to you and to our audience. Thank you, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.